Welcome back to Wellness Wave. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. My name is Phil George. I'm a clinical biochemist, a certified personal trainer, and a health coach. And we have a very special guest that I'm really excited about today, and that's Dr. Pete. And
Yes.
Dr. Pete, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Pete. I work for and founded Worcester Holistic Health and Wellness in Worcester. I started it really about 2012. But when I started back then, it was a lot of just me and my friends, right? Working not really with the public, but little things here and there. And what really got me started was my own life. You know, it's one where I think back on my life, where it is now, where it started. Being 18 and living in my first apartment. And I think for a lot of us, we don't have the perfect first apartment. But this one, man, to me, it took the cake. And it was a giant hole in my ceiling. My car was a Chevy Lumina that the alternator was gone. So, like, I had this extension cord going out my window. And, you know, just to charge the battery, just to get me to work, charging it at work so I could get home. You know, and just really going, like, is this my life? And I knew it wasn't the life I wanted, but I also didn't know how to get the life I wanted. And that's what ultimately catapulted me into making this my career, because I was like, I got to work on this for myself. And that's where, like, Think and Grow Rich, The Strangest Secret, The Science of Getting Rich really started being, you know, put in my ear, like, hey, you got to look at this and read this and understand it. And it was one where I think of in school, we read a book, we move on. And that was my mentality. But then I was like, no, like, that can't be right. And I remember for about a year straight, I read Think and Grow Rich on repeat. And every time I read it, I understood it better. I understood it differently. I understood how to actually implement things that changed my life. And very quickly, when I started implementing it before I really understood it, just implementing it, I got a new apartment that had a nice big yard. There was actually a house I could share with my friends. Someone came and fixed my car for free. And I'm like, holy cow, this works. And if you asked me then, I was like, oh, that stuff changed first, then I changed. If you ask me now in hindsight, I changed first. That's what changed everything else.
Right, it's interesting. There's that famous movie book, The Secret. They talk about that. It kind of all the karma thing where what you put out, you get back. To your point about the book, how powerful books are. I go to New Kitchen a lot, and many years ago when they first opened up, this young kid in the late teens, he worked there, and I said he'd come over and we would talk. And the kid was in a gang, and he was trying to get out of the gang, you know, broken family, the whole 9 yards. And so basically I had this book, and I'd already read it, and it was sitting around, and it's Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I said to him, I said, you know what, I said, read this book. I said, you know, read the book, you know, you can keep it, you know, pay it forward, give it to somebody else. Long story short, he wound up leaving and going. And I don't know, many years later, I walked into a business, and I walked in, and there was this young man at the desk. And he knew my name because I was there to meet one of his associates. And he says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I go, "No." He says, "I'm Mario." I remember his name was Mario. He says, "I'm Mario." He says, "That I can't swear on the air, but that effing book changed my life." He said, "You don't believe what that did for me." So we don't realize these little things we do for other people, like throw in that little pebble and the ripples, it goes out. So maybe he's given that to other people, and again, once you're saying, once you change your mindset, once you change your mindset, like it says, I don't get too voodoo here, but you know, that type of stuff, it makes such a huge difference. The other thing I like about your story, I was watching this thing on Netflix called Loudermilk, and he's a drug rehab guy, and they said, no one can understand unless you've been through it. That's why out AA, Weight Watchers, and all these things, you've been through it. You found a way to overcome your obstacle. Because unless you've been able to overcome that obstacle, you can't, it's hard for you to help somebody else, do it. So that's what I love about your story.
Yeah, right, because like it's so important to be willing to, I say, like, change, right? And not in these grandiose ways. It's tiny ones. It's these little things, you know? And so for me, a lot of what I do, and I found that worked really well, is like hypnosis, you know? And I understand for a lot of people it gets that bad connotation around it of, like, you know, I think of like TV shows, so like there's Gotham and movie Office Space. I think that's the other big one people always bring up, where you're like, oh, someone's controlling me. Like, I'm going to say, you're going to go rob the bank down the road, you're going to bring me all the money back, and you're going to forget we ever met. No, it's not how it works at all. You know, I joke with my clients that if it was that simple, like, I wouldn't even get out of bed. Like, people would be lined up at my door to be like, heal me, change me. It's like, no, like, hypnosis is about you taking control of your own life. And I get to be that GPS voice going, hey, let's take a left turn here, because this is going to be the fastest route, you know? And I think of, like, life in general. There's always obstacles. There's always roadblocks and potholes and, you know, all these things that we have to be prepared for. And hypnosis allows us to prepare for them in a very unique way. You know, I think of what a lot of us do, and I say, like, older modalities of healing and change was exposure therapy, right? You're afraid of dogs, and what do they say? They go, well, we're going to put you in a pound full of puppies.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going to be scared, and you're in the moment, you know. But with hypnosis, you get that same exposure, but up here first. You know, you get to go, okay, so when I see a dog, how do I want to react, right? What is my natural reaction going to be? To run across the street, to run away. No, like, I don't want to do that. So if I didn't do that, well, what would I do instead? Okay, I'm just going to walk calmly, maybe a little briskly. Oh, that wasn't so bad. All right, let's do it again. Let's change the ending. Oh, so I'm going to go I'm a little bit calmer, more relaxed. And I found every time you practice it, it becomes more natural. It becomes easier for you for the real situation, you know? And so I remember I had a client who was petrified of snakes. Like, just the idea of a rubber snake on the desk, they would be out this room so fast. And within an hour, so she came to me because her son was having one of those societies come in. They bring in reptiles and alligators and birds. And she's like, I want to show my son I'm brave. I said, okay. And so we kind of went, all right, so, like, let's think about, like, there's that snake. It's a 13-foot boa constrictor. And you look at it. How do you feel? She goes, oh, like, I'm really anxious. I want to bolt. I said, okay. I said, but if you didn't bolt, what would you do? She goes, well, like, I would be calm. I said, okay. She goes, what does calm look like? And you can see it on it. Oh, okay, yeah. And how far away is the snake from you? Oh, it's about 20 feet. Okay, how do you feel? Well, I feel a little bit better. And just an hour of that, the next day, she went. Her son had the event. She goes, Pete, I touched a snake. It was the most liberating experience of my life, you know, in an hour. Like, that amazes me, you know. But that is, to me, is the power of accessing that part of our mind where that fear or the bad habit or the expectations we've created lives.
Well, it's interesting. A little bit until we talked a little about the neuroscience before we got into it. And then what I mentioned to you, there's probably the top neuroscientist in the world, Andrew Huberman, and he talked about that hypnosis gets a bad name because of and we wish it had a different name. But so the audience knows. So the analogy I like is basically your mind is like an iceberg. So your conscious mind is that little bit on top, but most of it is your subconscious mind, and we really are run by our subconscious mind. Yeah. The analogy I like to make is a computer. You go and you type in, your RAM's there, and that's a couple of gigabytes, but the terabyte that's running the show behind it, you don't see the stuff going on behind the scenes. Yep. So that's what's happening with your subconscious mind. The other thing the Jesuits used to say, give me a child up until the age of 6, I'll give you the man. They found out, going to different states, there's something called theta. It's almost like a sleeping state, where in order to survive as a child, we have to take everything in. We don't filter anything out. So a good example is, let's say that you're a child, you're always looking at your parents' face to see what's danger out there.
Yeah.
So what happens is, and then all of a sudden, your mother's afraid of dogs. You become afraid of dogs. You don't know why you're afraid of dogs, but it's imprinted. After the age of 6, that's hardwired into your brain. The other thing we talked a little bit about too is, let's say you have a really bad parents, and your parents says, you know what, you're no good, you'll never wind up to anything. What happens is that's hardwired. So that's your operating system. It's now become hardwired. I'm no good. I don't deserve to be happy. One of the things I talk about, why do women keep marrying the same idiots, or men the same idiots over and over again? It's because you were told, and you're hardwired into your brain, you're no good, you're not worth anything, and so you self-sabotage. You'll hear this all the time. Why do I keep marrying the same or dating these same people? They're toxic with me, because subconsciously what's happening is it's telling you you're no good. You're just playing out the script in the back of your head. So you're the expert. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what the hypnosis does, it shuts out the operating system over here. You go into the hard drive like you do with a technician, and you're going to tweak around there and say, well, what happened? Way back. What happened to you way back then? And then you reprogram. You're basically reprogramming the hard drive, right? You're reprogramming the hard drive. So it's not voodoo. This is neuroscience.
Neuroscience, yep. And you're 100% right. Like, this is what I love, is you're 100% right. Like, we look as children, so I usually go up to the age of 7. Some children could be later. Some children could be earlier. Really, life determines when that conscious mind really comes online. But you're right. Like, as children, we are in theta. Right? We're just absorbing everything.
To survive.
To survive, right? And it's how we see the world and the people in the world. It's how we know good guys versus bad guys. And like you said, when we're children, and so like my daughter's 5, if we're out somewhere and there's someone new, she goes, okay, Dad's cool. Okay, I'm cool. If she looks up at me and I'm like, oh my goodness, she's instantly gonna go, oh my goodness, right? Because she's learning, she's absorbing. And other things we don't think about is the shows we watch, it's the music, especially when we're younger, it's all taken in. They say consciously we can do 7 bits of information plus or minus 2. That's not a lot of information. And if we just think about what's going on now, we have our clothes touching our skin, we have our heart beating, we're breathing, we're talking, we're listening, there's air flowing. There's so much going on that our mind instantly goes, well, I got to delete this, I got to delete that. It's why I think for a lot of us, until I bring attention to it, you're not thinking about maybe your shoes on your feet or your shirt touching your shoulders. But when you hear, you go, oh, now, yeah, I can feel that now, It's happening, but it's at the unconscious level it's happening, And so when we go into hypnosis, you're right, like we put let's say the word program that we're typing our letter on aside, and now we're into reprogramming it. We're being able to automatically do things differently that it couldn't do before. And so when we think about, I like this one a lot of like, I'm not deserving, right? Growing up, I say for me, growing up with 3 older brothers, I heard an awful lot, why aren't you more like Adam? Whew, okay, like that's in there, right? Now, as a child, I can't think as an adult. I can only think as a child. As an adult, though, I can go back to that moment and think as an adult. And I can go, oh, like this is what they actually meant, not what I interpreted at that time. And when we do that, it doesn't change the memory, but it changes that emotional charge that we've held on to that memory, And when we begin to change 1 or 2, becomes that domino to go through all the other memories in our life to go, yeah, like that no longer bothers me. It's amazing how that no longer bothers me, But
again, people are self-sabotaging, we're talking about, and they don't realize they're self-sabotaging. So that's what hypnosis does. It bypasses. We like to call it the monkey mind. Yeah. We put in the monkey, so we talked about this before. The monkey's here. The monkey's running the show. Okay, say, okay, monkey, have a banana. Go over here. We'll have the banana, and then you're going right into the hard drive, and you're saying, we're gonna fix this hard drive. So it's like I'm not a computer or programmer, but they go in there, and my computer it's glitchy. It does this. Well, I go in, they do this, they do that, and magic. You know?
They pull up that screen you've never seen before.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
like, what is this? I've never seen this. I don't know how to get to this. But that's ultimately what I do. I'm pulling up that screen where we get to go, all right, like as long as you're okay with this, and that is, when it comes to hypnosis, a huge thing, is you have to be okay with it. You know, I used to joke around when I really first got started with people quitting smoking. I'm like, great, like this is what we're gonna do. Like tomorrow you won't smoke anymore, but you're gonna get out of bed and do a handstand. People are like, I don't do handstands now. You know, and what that means is even in hypnosis, they will reject that idea. Because yes, even though that monkey mind is to the side, it still kind of has its, ears to the door going, do I approve? You know, and that's where it changes. One, there's no one size fits all, right? It changes per person of what they find acceptable, right? One person may go like, no, I don't want to replace smoking with anything. Someone might go, I'm okay with chewing gum. You know, I'm a big fan of taking a few deep breaths and calming ourselves and kind of just letting it pass. But some people go, no, I need something. Like, I need something in my hand. And they go, okay, instead of a cigarette, what else is there? Oh, it's a pencil or a pen. Perfect. That's way better, right? To me, especially when it comes like to, say, quitting smoking, anything's better than smoking as long as it's not illegal or immoral.
Right, that's the thing. Going a little bit again into the neurophysiology, so people know. So what happens is, you have so many neurons in your brain, and when you're born, you have trillions of neurons in there. And people don't realize what happens is actually you prune these neurons as you get older. You have, because I don't need this one, I don't need that one. In neuroscience, there's a term that says neurons that fire together, wire together. I deal a lot with athletes, and what happens, and the joke is, I try to get somebody, I used to coach tennis over at Becker, and I used to give tennis lessons. It's much easier to teach somebody from scratch than with bad habits, because you're hardwired. You're basically the muscle-mind connection. The way I like to give the analogy, it's like a forest. The grass is thick. You keep walking the same path over and over again, that's the pathway. So what you're saying, the same thing, you're smoking. So I get up in the morning, I have my coffee, and I have my cigarette. This is the pathway. It's over there. So you're going in there, you're changing the pathway. That would be very, very hard for a person to do on their own, because nicotine is so addictive, or whatever your bad
Whatever the bad habit right?
is. You're rearranging the foliage in the brain, basically. You're mixing things around. So if you have a bad habit, you're going to do it over, because that's the easiest route. The neurons that fire together, wire together. You're changing those neurons firing in a different pattern.
Yeah, and it's one where I always look at it. You ever go to like a building, right? And you see like the sidewalk where it makes that perfect 90-degree angle, but right before it, you can see where people have just consistently shortcutted, right? To me, that's the bad habit, is that shortcut, right? Where it's, when I'm stressed, the shortcut is I'm just gonna have some ice cream, right? And that eventually becomes that hardwired part. And for me, it's not about, necessarily crumbling it, destroying it, but going, no, let's just go the right way. Let's go, hey, let me recognize I'm stressed. How do we handle the stress so the stress actually goes down, and we don't need that little shortcut anymore? So like you said, the foliage then grows in, and that shortcut disappears. And we just go, no, when I'm stressed versus the ice cream, I now go, oh, you know what? I'm going to go meditate for a couple minutes. I'm going to take those few deep breaths. You know what? Maybe I'm just going to go outside, say the things I can't say inside, and then come back and be like, all right, I'm better.
Yeah, the other thing I talk a lot about, going to what you're saying, is if you think about way back when you first learned how to drive a car, so complicated. Tying your shoes, so complicated. Remember how hard it was to tie your shoe?
Yeah.
So, but again, those neurons that fire together, now you're asleep, you can tie your shoe, eyes closed, you can drive a car, pretty much, think about anything. But what happens is you've built those pathways. So what's happening, the bad habits work the same way. This is the bad habit you're in. So by the hypnosis, you're able to change those pathways.
Yeah.
And no drugs, no this, and obviously it's nice if you could do it on your own. But this is a shortcut with no drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and what I love is like we want to do it on our own, right? And ultimately, we can get to the level where we can do most on our own. But just like learning to drive a car, your parents weren't like, "Oh, you got your permit? Here, take the keys. We'll sit in the back seat." They want to sit next to you, right? They help guide you so you can get just the basics down, right? Then you get your license, and then you're out on your own, and all of a sudden you're back to square one where you're like, "Oh man, like I'm on my own now." It brings on a new level. And it's the repetition of still continuing to do it that allows you to do it. So now we can, have our drinks or coffee, have the window open, the music on, thoughts here, thoughts there. And, it's the repetition though of doing it on our own that makes it good. But in the beginning, we always need that other person. It's the same thing with sports. Like, you just don't pick up a tennis racket and be like, "Oh, I'm going to be a professional." You need that coach. In school, we need that teacher. We don't always need that teacher. The teacher will change over time because we're learning more. But in the beginning, we need that teacher to put us in that right direction.
But again, I think we talked before using the computer analogy. Okay, I know how to type, but I don't know how to fix the hard drive. So you're the technician, the analogy, you're the technician, you're the brain technician that goes in there, you're bypassing the RAM, and you're going right into the hard drive, and then everything's going to work a lot more smoothly. And the other thing, I'm sure you can do with anything, bad eating habits, things like that, this and everything else. Yeah. You're changing that hard drive. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could probably, any kind of bad habit, you probably can go in there and reprogram it.
Yep. The only answer people always ask is there's no clear answer. It's how many sessions, right? Certain things, 1, 2, it's as if it never did it. Other things are so hardwired in that it could take 5, 6, maybe 13. That's the one thing people always go like, how many do I need? And it's like, well, we won't know until we're in that programming, right? I always relate it to like when we're babies, we're born being able to do anything. 2 babies next to each other, they could be doctors and lawyers and astronauts and anything. It's not until they really go home that the programming really starts, And it's like, well, no one in our family's ever gone to college. Like, you think you're going to be the first one? There's that little, notch in that belt and that neuron, that little, keystroke behind the scenes where it's like, now it's, not firing right, and there's other things. And then there's the, oh man, I got a bad math test grade. That reaffirms no one's ever gone to college, and then you go through and then you make a mistake and you go, there's another mark for me, and it's just all behind the scenes putting those little error messages in there. And sometimes it just takes longer to clear up all of them. We can get a good amount of them, but you never know what's also underneath it.
And how hard, I like the analogy I like it was with the tennis. So I get a student and has been hitting the wrong backhand for 20 years. It's taking me a lot longer to get him over that than a person that's just been hitting it for 2 weeks. So it depends, I'm guessing, how hardwired that is into, and how much of that is your identity. I'm not smart enough to go to college. I'm not this, I'm not that, because my parents said this is my identity. So again, that's the hard drive, and you're rewiring that hard drive and saying, you know what, you can. You can, if you can do this stuff, you're changing almost that the way they view themselves.
Yep, and that's really how it works. Is like so many of us will go, oh, you know what, Pete, I'll believe myself when I get into college. It's like, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Like, you got to believe it in here first. That, you know what, I can go to college. I do deserve to go to college. I do deserve a great job. That's when the outside will change, And if there's one thing like I strive really hard for is stop looking outside in and start working inside out, because that's where the real magic happens. I've seen it so many times where even with celebrities, they may get success, but when they don't work on the inside, they still turn to alcohol. They still deal with depression and, drugs. And we're maybe on our couch at home going, wow, like how bad can they have it? Money doesn't make things better. It doesn't make things worse. Having a house doesn't make things better or make things worse. It's how we feel inside determines how we interpret everything on the outside. And so when we really go that route first and we go, you know what, like I love myself enough to go, I'm done with this bad habit. Whatever it is, whether it's going, wow, like I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm fat, I'm ugly. When we go, I'm done with that, I'm going to start loving myself. That's when everything changes. That's hypnosis.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. We talk about stars, so many stars you see. And it's funny because a lot of these people, these men or women, they're beautiful, they're successful, and they go and they kill themselves. Because, most people would give anything to have that, but if they're not happy, they're not happy inside. And again, if you're not happy inside, all the trappings are not going to make you happy. So again, I think that's the whole thing where you have to change that neural programming in your brain telling you, again, maybe their mother told them they weren't worth it for whatever reasons, and no matter what happens. The other thing I was interesting talking about, the whole thing is that they say one of the most dangerous things that can happen to somebody is to get everything that they want. Mm-hmm. Because we're like donkeys with the carrot in front of us. And we always think, if I only had this, I'll be happy. If I only had that, I'll be happy. And you go on and on. So you never look inside and say, is the problem in here? Because the problem, if I only had this, there's tons of studies. People win the lotteries over and over again. They're dead broke. They're dead broke. Because they say, I have everything I want, and I'm not happy. And then they commit suicide because they have to look inside. But again, they have to change that programming that's going on there. So again, a little time and some money invested in this. No drugs. You don't have to do anything. Really, what you have to lose, except maybe getting your
bad habit.
The bad habit.
I say that the hardest thing I think for people sometimes when they go, what do I have to lose? You said it before, their identity. And for a lot of us, that's scary because we go, well, if I'm not this, like, who am I? Like this is how I lived my whole life. If I don't have this, like, but what if I never get this? And so our mind goes, well, it's safer to stay here.
The devil,
Right. We may know we're not happy, but at least we know what to expect. And so that's what I think stops a lot of people. And I will say, like, especially with me and other really good hypnotists, they deal with that, right? Because ultimately we get to create who we want to be. Now, to know who we want to be, we really have to know what we value. Because let's say you go, wow, like, Pete, like I really want to be successful, but I'm also a family man. And I feel like if I'm going to be successful, I got to give up my family. Are you really going to want to change? If you really value family and you go, I got to have to sacrifice that for money? No. But when you go, no, you could have family and the success. Now it's like, oh, okay, how do we do that? And everyone's individual, everyone's different, and we got to find those roadblocks, right? We got to find those stumbling blocks to go, okay, so when this comes up, right, we hear so many times the shiny object syndrome. When that shiny object comes up, how do we say no to it? To stay on the tried and true path to happiness. That's where the magic comes in with hypnosis as well. Because it brings both worlds together.
And Pete, you were saying, I know you had some accolades. You voted top hypnotist in Worcester. There's a couple of them.
Yep, yeah. So I won 2 awards, one from the Worcester Business Journal, and the other one was through the town, where they sent me a nice plaque, and I'm like, oh my God, it came out of the blue. And I really appreciate it because it means I'm changing lives. You know,
And people are voting for you and saying that this is the guy. And
Yeah.
Pete, so how would somebody reach you if they want to look into this?
Yep. So you can go straight to worcesterholistic.com. On there, I have stuff about hypnosis, other coaching. We did just add massage therapy. It's amazing. People love it. They're like, "Why didn't I do this before?" For us, we really like working with people who want that holistic approach. Who want to go like, I don't want that Band-Aid anymore. I want that ability to really take control of my life, to create really good feelings in my life.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. No drugs. What you have to lose as opposed to some bad habits.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank
and
you.
Again, anybody who wants to look into it, you can email me, philgeorge@charter.net. Any questions for Pete? Any questions for me? And we'll see you next week.
Yes.
One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, philgeorge@charter.net for a free consult.